I thought about what I could talk about in 45 minutes, and if you've lived 68 years, almost 69, it's very difficult to compress that into 45 minutes because there is so much that I could talk about. So I hope what I say today will hit a nerve with at least some of you that will be beneficial and help you in your careers. I used to come down when Larry taught here. He taught entrepreneurial perspective here for several years. And once every semester they would invite me to come and take 3 hours to talk about what it was like to be married to the wife, or what it was like to be the wife of an entrepreneur. And it was therapy for us because he wasn't aware how hard it is to be the wife of an entrepreneur who is gone all the time working hard, putting everything on the line. And so as I talked about that, it became an opportunity for us to discuss a lot of things that may not have otherwise been discussed. And I think it's important, as you want to be entrepreneurs, that you understand your main partner is your spouse. And it's very important that you understand each other and that you know what each other is going through, because it's not all about you. It's not all about the work you're doing. It's about the work your spouse is doing on the other end. One can't do it without the other. On May 1st, 1979, a little over 33 years ago, the Larry H. Miller Company opened its doors for business for the first time. Toyota of Murray in Murray, Utah officially became Larry H. Miller Toyota. Actually, it became Larry Miller Toyota, and we had to put the H in because of another businessman in the area who was named Larry Miller, who didn't like us using Larry Miller. So we compromised and put the H in, and that's how that came to be. Larry had just turned 35 years old. We had been married for 14 years. 8.5 of those years had been spent living in Colorado, in Littleton, away from our families. We had 5 children aged 12, 10, 7, 6, and 1.5. That was the beginning of a new chapter in our lives. But our story doesn't start with our first dealership. It starts with 2 young people in junior high school who met when they were 12 years old, started dating when they were 14, and married at 21. Theirs was a rocky but exciting courtship spread over a period of 6 years, and while they tried to grow up and discover who they were and where they wanted to go. And during that process, they fell in love and were married in 1965. This is our story, and I'd like to share part of it with you. Larry and I were both very independent and very strong-willed by nature. Once we were married, we relied only on each other, and we relied on each other for everything, and we never went to our parents for help. We were determined to be self-sufficient and make our way in the world together. We were a good team. We complemented each other's strengths, and we compensated for each other's weaknesses. We accepted responsibility for ourselves right from the very start, and we didn't complain when things got tough, and they always do get tough. We just put our heads down and worked harder, and we always found a solution to our problems. Like many young, hopeful couples, we felt we were ready to conquer the world, and we were eager to give it our very best. My steady job at the telephone company allowed Larry to move around from job to job and while he tried to find something that suited his skills and his desire to work. And he wanted something he could excel at, but he was having trouble finding that. So after having about 6 or 7 jobs in the first 5 years of our marriage, and not finding anything that he was really happy with, and being discouraged by some of the ethics that he saw in business, we decided to take a chance and, at the urging of some friends, move to Colorado. We felt that there we could spread our wings and get a fresh start in the job market. And Larry could take advantage of playing softball for a world-class softball team, which was really his first love. And the year was 1979. By that time, we had 2 little boys, ages 2.5 and almost 5. We sold our home in Salt Lake City in November. We packed up our belongings, put our kids in the car, and moved to Colorado. It was a new state, a new adventure, and a different set of challenges, and we did not know exactly what the future had in store. We were experiencing a whole range of emotions as we did that, and at the top of the list was excitement. Once we got to Colorado and got settled, we were faced with some other things. We were faced with disappointment, adjustments, and in the long run, a lot of growth. The first real disappointment came when Larry got his first paycheck, and it was half of what they had promised him. We could not live on $500 a month, so he determined that he needed to go look for another job. He had been promised that he would be a parts man. In reality, he was a counterman. They don't pay parts managers the same as they pay countermen. They told him the reason for the discrepancy was they were going to need to build a new building and didn't need a new parts manager until they had the new Toyota building, and that would be maybe a year away. They thought they could keep him online until that happened, but it wasn't to be. There were other challenges like making new friends, learning how to get around in a strange city, but our job, having a good job, was the most immediate concern. Adjusting came in the form of living in a new state, far away from family and friends. We had never been away from home before for a long period of time. We were born and raised in Salt Lake City. I had quit my job at the telephone company, and I was learning how to be a stay-at-home mom, which for me was very difficult. I was not used to being around my children all day, every day. And our kids were faced with unfamiliar surroundings, and they were faced with making new friends. But we relied on each other, we put down roots, and we got acquainted with our new surroundings. As for growth, that came in a lot of ways. One of the most important areas of growth during our years in Colorado was that our family increased in numbers. During the 8.5 years we were there, we had 3 additional children. Another area of growth was Larry's job. He loved his job, and the growth he had in that position was exponential. He was able to learn quickly and advance quickly, and that allowed him to be successful and to be able to prepare for the future, even at that time. But even though at that time we were not really looking too far ahead, all we wanted was security and to be able to do our best. Another area of growth came as we reconnected with religion. When we left Utah, we had not been active in the church, and we really hadn't even felt a need for it in our lives because we were so independent that we thought we could make it on our own. We had both grown up in religious families. They were very strong families, but somehow as a teenager, we moved away from that with new jobs and other activities. But once we moved to Colorado, we were able to see the world through different eyes. And it was a new perspective, and it helped us to understand the importance of religion and how it could make our lives better. And I need to add here that David Brown was a real influential part of that change in our lives. He was our bishop there. Gradually, we made some major changes that have made all the difference through religion, made all the difference in the path that our lives have taken. I've often said that the 8.5 years we lived in Colorado were the years we experienced the most personal growth in our lives at that time. We were off by ourselves with no family to rely on. We discovered who we were, what we meant to each other, and where we were trying to go. And we reconnected with our God, strengthened our relationship with each other, and increased our family from 2 children to 5. Larry's opportunity and growth in the Stevenson organization was the best thing that had happened to him in his career to that point. Mr. Stevenson was a fine man, a very ethical person, and very willing to let Larry use his talents to set up the parts department the way he wanted to, which allowed him to be able to grow and to be entrepreneurial. And then the bottom fell out of our lives, or at least we thought it did. Chuck Stevenson, the man who owned the company, asked Larry to mentor his sons. They were getting older. He had 8 sons and 5 dealerships. Larry had grown or advanced from the parts manager to a general manager in the Toyota store to operations manager over 5 stores. And now it was time for Chuck's children to start coming into the business, which was the whole reason he was doing it. Of course, Larry complied with that request, but he was unsettled, and he soon realized that what he could not do while he was mentoring those sons was advance his own career. Not only that, but he had been asked to move from the operations manager back to the general manager of one store, so it cut his responsibility in that way. He felt like he was going backward, even though his pay rate stayed the same. So we didn't know what the future held for us exactly, or really how to proceed from that point. But Larry felt like maybe he was ready to strike out on his own, so we decided to look for a dealership to buy, preferably one in the Salt Lake area, and we would come back home to our roots. Once we decided that, things happened very quickly. It felt very much like we were being guided by a higher power in our decisions. There were 2 tracks in our lives that were happening at the same time. One was we were becoming more active in the church, and the other one was the business became a factor in where we were going. So those 2 parallel lines made a big change in our lives. So at that time, we took some vacation time and came back home for a week. On a Saturday afternoon, while he was at lunch with Greg and some friends, Larry made a deal with the owners of Toyota of Murray, Hugh Gardner and Tony Hernandez, to purchase the first dealership that we would buy. When he came home, he said to me, "What would you say if I told you I spent $1 million today?" I said, "I didn't know we had $1 million." And we didn't. What we did have was money that we had saved from each time he had had a promotion and got a pay raise. When those things happened, we put that additional money in a savings account or invested it, and we did not raise our standard of living. We just maintained the way we lived and saved that money. We had decided early in our marriage that we didn't like being in debt, so we were very careful, and we planned a program for getting all of our bills paid and vowed to never go into personal debt again. We did have some medical bills that we could not avoid, but that was the challenge for us, was to get those paid off. So by the time we were faced with the opportunity to buy this first dealership, we had saved $88,000. Now that's a far cry from $1 million, but it's all we had. And even at that, we had to have a partner to help us get into that dealership. So he went to his uncle and asked him if he would invest in the dealership with him. That was a brand new, exciting adventure in our lives, and it was also very scary. One thing that hit me very hard was now we were not just responsible for ourselves. We had all these employees that we had to make sure got paychecks, and that was a hard thing for me to get my head around. There were times when Larry would come home that first year and say, "I'm sorry, I just don't have enough money to pay us. I have to make payroll." So we would, and I handled all of the bills at home, so I would juggle and make sure they got paid. I learned a lot. But as we developed the business, Larry used me for a sounding board, and this is where using your spouse is very important. We spent a lot of time talking about what he was doing and how he was doing it, and he kept me in the loop on everything. We'd spend hours and hours and hours talking. Of course, Larry liked to talk. Some of you may not like to talk like he did, but I was a good listener and he was a good talker. He set up the business in a way that we were equal partners legally. One of the most important things that happened in the startup of our own business was that it offered time to find out what we were really made of. When you go into business for yourself, you have to have a platform to build it on, and that platform is generally personal. Our core values came into clear view. It became clear to us that what you are is reflected in what you do. They became the foundation of our business, and they permeated every interaction we had with employees and customers. Integrity was and still is the cornerstone of our business. Now, the definition of integrity is the consistency of actions, values, methods, measures, principles, expectations, and outcomes. Or in other words, doing the right thing for the right reason every time. Along with integrity, there was a lot of honesty, hard work, sacrifice, and willingness to take a chance on our own. Larry had the opportunity during this time to exercise his real talents. He had the opportunity to be an entrepreneur. He loved building things. I find that most entrepreneurs would rather build things than run them. He loved providing quality jobs. He championed the free enterprise system. It was very important to him. He loved a challenge, and he was always eager to learn something new and then teach it to someone else. He developed a lot of philosophies about life and business, and he put them into action. As a result of being a successful businessman and entrepreneur, he was asked if he would be interested in teaching an entrepreneurial perspective class at BYU. And during that process, he was able to identify and put into words what for him it meant to be an entrepreneur. I'd like to read his definition to you. An entrepreneur is someone who understands 1, hard work, 2, risk and reward, 3, supply and demand, 4, how to feel the marketplace. He went a lot on feel. He was very aware of what was going on in the business community and trends, and he would say, I need to feel it, which meant he had to be patient a lot of times. Number 5, an entrepreneur who is someone who overcomes the fear of failure, believing that risk can cause failure, but success cannot come without it. 6, they believe or they understand the principle of goal setting. And 7, they have a vision of a project, and they're willing to go forward with it even when no one else shares the vision, which is what happened with the Delta Center. 8, that it can indeed be lonely at the top, but he goes there anyway. 9, the relationship between freedom and free enterprise. He never passed up an opportunity to talk about the importance of freedom and free enterprise when it comes to entrepreneurship. And 10, that the place he lives and works should be better when he left than when he came, because he was there. And then he added, P.S., the American dream is live and well. While Larry taught that class, he team taught with Professor Keith Hunt, who is now retired. Professor Hunt taught, Larry agreed, that entrepreneurship is one sweat for bread activity that has the potential to give you maximum freedom. Freedom to live your life the way you want to. Freedom to earn as much as you want to earn. Freedom to do whatever you want to do with your earnings. Freedom to benefit the lives of others by providing employment and goods and services, and most of all, freedom to live according to the values and beliefs that you cherish as true. However, like everything else in life, entrepreneurship can also bring the exact opposite. And don't ever let this escape you. It can bring addiction to the excitement of the venture. It can bring slavery to indebtedness and the demands of others. It can bring the loss of all your wealth. It can bring obsession for increased riches and economic power. It can bring the destruction of others' lives and well-being. and doing whatever it takes to get riches and power you lust for. So entrepreneurial perspective can be good or evil, uplifting or degrading, help others or hurt others. It can greatly enlarge your soul or it can shrivel your soul. Entrepreneurial perspective is really neutral. It's what you do with it that makes it good or evil. Now, getting back to our story, as we made a decision to go into business for ourselves, we were also making a strong commitment to reactivation in the church. We started paying our tithing and preparing ourselves to go to the temple to be sealed and have our 5 children sealed to us as well. As those things took place in our lives changed so fast and so furiously that it felt like we were on a roller coaster without any brakes a lot of the time. One thing that happened to us as we went to the temple, the officiator, whom we did not know and who did not know us, this was in 1980, said to us before the ceremony, "I feel compelled to tell you that your name will be known in this valley by thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands." We were just starting out. We had no idea what he was talking about. I'm not sure he knew what he was talking about, but he was prophetic. It wasn't long after the purchase of that dealership that a second one was bought, and then a third, and then a fourth, and it soon became clear to me that that was just the beginning. We were either going to keep expanding beyond anything that either one of us had ever envisioned, and we didn't necessarily plan it that way. It just sort of happened with one new door opening after another. I have to tell you that at this time, and always, all through Larry's business career, I remember him praying for guidance so that he would know which doors to walk through and which ones to not pay attention to. In the first 6 years, we bought 9 dealerships, starting with Toyota of Murray, sold 2 of those 9, established 4 new auto-related businesses, bought out our partner, and built our very first new Toyota store in Murray, and that was just 1983. That store has now been torn down and replaced with the 3rd generation Toyota store in Murray. In 1985, we were approached to look at buying the Utah Jazz because it was in jeopardy of being sold to a venture outside of Utah. And Larry realized that if it ever left Utah, we would not get back a major league sport because we are a small market, and it's very difficult for a major league franchise to make it in a small market the way they're set up. They rely so much on the media and revenue from big markets to make it. If we don't have the base, we don't have the money. No one else showed much of an interest in saving the Jazz and keeping it from leaving, so Larry stepped up. He figured out a way to leverage our resources. He borrowed a huge amount of money, and far more than our net worth was, and we became part owners of a professional basketball team. We had only been to a handful of games at that time. We didn't know a lot about being an owner or even being a fan, but we began attending every home game. Now, up to that time, the general public did not know who we were or who Larry Miller was because he didn't do his own advertising. He had hired a company to do his advertising, and everyone thought the man on the TV was Larry Miller. But when we started talking about buying the Jazz, people wanted to know more about us. Who was Larry Miller? They wanted to know what kind of people we were and what kind of an empire we were trying to amass. But building an empire was not one of our goals. We really hadn't thought about our lives in terms of an empire. It wasn't something that we ever discussed, and it was not something we consciously set out to do. But one thing led to another, and then another, and then another. And before we knew it, we were on our way to building an empire. As our lives became very public with the purchase of the Utah Jazz, people became more and more aware of us, and we were quite uneasy about the attention that we were getting. When we realized what was happening, our concern immediately became, how do we remain who we are to regular, normal people and help our children to be regular, normal children? How do we teach them correct principles in a distorted world and remain true to the stewardship that had suddenly become ours while facing a whole new set of experiences and demands on our time and in the business world? That's a very thought-provoking question, and if you become successful, believe me, it will be part of your life. Children are affected by success, and you must do everything you can to help them put it in perspective and remain grounded. So the answer was we needed to work very hard to try to keep things in perspective. We needed to especially keep money in perspective. Now that's a very easy thing to say, but money has a lot of power, and it can have an effect on children, it can have effect on your friends. I remember one time my brother, who had not been in Salt Lake for a long time, said to me, "You have certainly changed." Well, I hadn't changed, at least not in my mind, but his perspective of me had changed because now I was a different person in the media. We needed to protect, stand up for, and keep our values intact. And we needed to keep who and what we wanted to be clearly in focus every single day. Larry described it by saying we need to be very careful not to start believing our own press clippings. He talked a lot about keeping things in perspective, and one of the things that was very high on his priority list was to not let money change us. One good thing about us was that money wasn't the driving force in our lives, but he always wanted to guard against the possibility that it might become that. There's a piece of Jewish wisdom that says, carry 2 pieces of paper in your pocket, one that says, I am but a speck of dust, and another that says, the world was created for me. Looking at yourself that way helps you put life in perspective. In the grand scheme of the universe, you really are an insignificant speck. But in your own sphere of influence, you have a huge impact, and you have to keep a balance between the two. From the beginning in our personal lives, we worked very hard to manage money and be wise about how we used it, and we tried never to live beyond our means or never to live lavishly. We wanted to stay normal. As Larry's pay increased, we maintained the same attitude and lifestyle as before. But once in a while, we'd loosen up if we needed to move to a bigger house because we had more children, or if our lawnmower broke, we'd buy a new lawnmower. But we still remained very careful with our money. I remember telling the children, I didn't want to lie to them when they'd ask for something. Instead of saying, we can't afford it, I'd say, no, we don't have money for that. We planned for the future by saving and managing diligently. And we were able to put money away. We realized that sometimes we could help some other people. One day, Larry asked me, this was early in our marriage, if I was okay with him loaning our whole savings, which was $300, to a friend who needed some help. Well, that was such a significant experience for me because we worked really hard to save $300 that I never forgot the feeling of being in a position to help someone and to sacrifice what I thought I needed for them. That was all the money in the world to me, and it had taken us a while to save it, but when he couldn't pay it back, then it became a gift to him, and he didn't ever pay it back. But the reason it became a gift and a forgiven debt was that we did not want to be burdened by trying to collect. It was easier to give it than to always be upset about it. Learning to give became one of our greatest blessings and remains so to this day. For me, That incident was like planting a seed that grew into a practice of philosophy in later years. Meanwhile, our empire continued to grow. Some of the reasons it did were because we were diligent about several things. We were diligent about paying our tithing, which I would say was number one. We were diligent about paying our taxes, which is really number two, servicing our debt, and then putting back into the company to increase the base. We always put back into the company rather than spending the profit. The dictionary describes an empire as increasing the size and scope of an organization's power and influence. And even though I don't like being described as an empire, using that definition, then I would agree that we have built an empire. An empire that's dedicated and promoted to doing good. At one time, John Stockton referred to Larry as a king, a servant king, one who takes care of his people and serves them, and I also agree with that. A servant king of an empire, an interesting concept. During Larry's reign as servant king, he established some very important rules of the kingdom. I want to share a few of them with you. Number one was no fair keeping it all because you don't need it. Now that may be hard for you to understand at your place in life right now, but once you make it big, you don't need it all. You can't spend it all. With that attitude, it was as easy for him to build a $50 million campus for Salt Lake Community College as it was to buy a new tire for a stranded tourist and have that unfixable flat changed for him at no cost. It didn't matter. It was all the same. Number two, establish what is sufficient for your needs and then do good things with the rest. Only you can determine what's sufficient for your needs. It will be different for everybody. Your needs are different than your neighbor's needs. Some people will be content with food, clothing, and shelter, and others will need much more, like boats and vacations and expensive schooling, and that's okay. If that's your need, you define it, and then you have sufficient, you make sure you have sufficient for your needs. If the basic needs are met and you want to be able to do some extra things, you have the right to decide what is sufficient. But once your needs are met, then it becomes important to do good things with the rest. Number three, don't change your standard of living just because you get a raise. You don't need to spend everything you earn. Save it for a rainy day, yours or someone else's. Number four, protect the base. Always make sure you have a solid foundation. It will keep you financially stable. Don't erode the foundation. That's one thing that is so tempting in business, to spend beyond what you can handle. Don't erode your foundation. Number five, just because you can afford something is not a reason to spend money. Use money wisely. Exercise good judgment. There will always be someone who could use your help. If you have money, it's better used in helping someone else. Number six, money is a means to an end, and that end is to help others. 7, go about doing good until there is too much good in the world. In 1997, we were finally able to take a deep breath and look at the success that we had achieved over those long years. Up to that time, it was just work, work, work. And Larry started to say, now what? We've worked all these years. We've built up this company. We're in a good position. We've accomplished what we set out to do. Now what? What is it all for? Why are we doing this? Why are we so blessed? In our conversations, we talked a lot about where we'd come from, where we were going, and what we wanted to be remembered for. We'd worked hard and we had sacrificed for a long time. Now we had all these resources and we were entering into a new phase in our lives. We decided that we wanted to use our resources to bless the lives of others in meaningful ways. Money is a tool to do good things with. We decided we needed to be engaged in philanthropic efforts in a more significant way. We'd always been involved in philanthropy. We had done what we could along the way, but it was usually on a personal basis. And now it was to become a big part of what we would and could do as an institution. We were exercising the principle of stewardship. Using what we had been put in charge of to make a difference. For us, we felt we really had no choice in the matter. We felt a responsibility to use our means to help others. Each month, we began to set aside substantial amounts of money for charity work rather than putting it back into the business. We set up a separate account for charity work. And we began to take on larger philanthropic projects. These have been and continue to be some of the most gratifying experiences of our lives. One of the most satisfying of these is a scholarship program that we set up for the children, the dependent children of our employees. We have put about 300 students through college, and that's not just one semester, that's a full scholarship. We also support a variety of other important educational projects like Driven to Teach. This is a program designed to let teachers who teach history get hands-on experience in the place the history happened. And then they go back and teach their students with a renewed vigor and enthusiasm, and those students catch fire. This gives them the ability to light a spark in those students, and it also teaches history to students who might otherwise not have an interest in it. It's designed to preserve our heritage and promote a love for our country. Some of the other things we do, and I'm going to read a list, and I'm not reading it to boast to you, I'm just reading it so that you can understand that there is an opportunity for you as you get into the position to make a difference, which is the most gratifying thing you can do. Right now, you probably think the most gratifying thing would be to be successful in building a business. But once you've built the business, then what? This is where it's really at. We award enrichment scholarships to minority students who otherwise would not be able to attend college, and collectively they have about a 3.95 grade point average. These are minority students who are the first to have been first in their family to go to college, and they are doing great things. We contribute to many colleges and universities to encourage excellence in teaching. We give to the food bank to help feed the homeless. We give to the Boys and Girls Clubs. We give to the battered women's shelters. We give to Junior Achievement and the Children's Museum and the Planetarium. We give to hospitals, the American Diabetes Association, the March of Dimes, and the Arthritis Foundation. We give to the arts and to museums of learning. We give to the Fallen Heroes Foundation, which helps families of fallen peace officers who've been killed in the line of duty. We give to the American Indian Services. We've helped several families with specialized vans for wheelchair-bound members. We've helped some underprivileged people get new teeth so they can work or go to school without embarrassment. The list really does go on, but you get the idea. There is so much need in the world. In 2008, when the economy was slipping and we had to make so many cuts in all departments in our company, in our business, that was just at the time Larry had his heart attack. He was in the hospital. We had been a year and a half before that. He realized that at some point he was going to retire, and he wanted to prepare his sons to take over the business. So one January morning, he called them all together, handed them a notebook and said, "You're going to want to take notes." and he started a classroom of teaching them about the business and what they needed to know. They had worked in the business all their working life, but this was a formal training to help them understand what it meant to take over the company after he was gone, not knowing that he wouldn't make it. We did that for about 1.5 years, and then in 2008, he had a heart attack. That was in June. In July, he turned over the company to our oldest son. And then the next year, in February, he passed away. In 2008, the economy tanked about in July and began a very serious downturn. We had to make cuts in all departments, but it was important to me to maintain some level of giving. I firmly believe that we are prosperous because we give. I don't expect that result, but I've seen it work too many times not to recognize it for what it is, one of our greatest blessings. Even as Larry was convalescing in the hospital, he was concerned about the people around him. There was a nurse who needed a new car. There was a young man that was trying to adopt a child. He was concerned about them and wanted to be able to help them. And it was there that he coined the phrase, "Go about doing good until there's too much good in the world." Imagine that. Could there ever be too much good? That means your job is never done, but keep trying. He was finally able to put the desire of his heart into words. It was something that he'd been doing all his life. It just didn't have a name until then. So we as a people must think about and become keenly aware of our sphere of influence and the impact that we have in our communities and neighborhoods. Our actions will have a profound impact on those who come after us or who may actually be following in our footsteps today, such as our family members and people in our workplace. My grandson said to me one day, and I homeschooled him, and he said, "Show me and I understand." We have to show others how it's done and teach them that it's their responsibility to carry on the legacy that we as a company or a family or an individual start. It has to start somewhere. I decided the day Larry died that I would honor him by continuing his work to make the world a better place. I'm not sure any of us will ever see the time when there's too much good in the world, but it will sure be fun trying to make it happen. I would encourage all of you to find ways within your means to give where you can. I know that many of you already do. It's a way of life in this community. If you're just starting out in your marriage or your career, I would encourage you to do what you can to help someone else. Starting out small is okay. You have to start somewhere. If you can only do a little, then just do a little. If you can do more, then do more. I promise you that if you give, you will always have enough for yourself and more. You can either give of your substance, you can give of your knowledge, or you can give of your service. They all count. Any of those will be great blessings to other people. Remember that gratitude unlocks the fullness of life. It makes what we have enough and more. If we're grateful for what we have, we're more likely to share it. I want to finish with just a short story. There was a wise woman who was traveling in the mountains, and she found a precious stone in a stream. The next day, she met another traveler who was hungry, and the wise woman opened her bag to share her food. The hungry traveler saw the precious stone and asked the woman to give it to him. She did without hesitation. The traveler left, and he was rejoicing in his good fortune. He knew that stone was worth enough to keep him secure for a lifetime. But a few days later, he came back to the woman to return the stone. "I've been thinking," he said. "I know how valuable that stone is, but I give it back to you in the hope that you can give me something even more precious. Give me what you have within you that enabled you to give me the stone." My hope is that we may all have within us what it takes to be able to give without hesitation. Thank you, and I wish you all well in every adventure that you're headed for. I appreciate being here today.